When we do videos about a lot of these vintage cup cars, a term that comes up a lot in those conversations is front steer and rear steer. Someone always says, what does that mean? Well, this will be your simple explanation with a little bit of backstory on each one. Front steer means the tie rod and the steering link is in front of the hub. So you have your spindle, like your wheels here. Front steer, this is the front of the car, tie rod's up here. Rear steer, it's back here. Now, like my car behind me right now was built in 2004, and by then everything was front steer geometry. Which is a typical front steer setup. You have the steering box up here and the pitman arm to the center link, drag link. It's in front of the hub. Rear steer was the commonplace in the 80s cars and down below that. It has origins from like the Ford Galaxy stuff that Holman Moody was doing in the 60s. That was rear steer, and the Banjo Matthews chassis that came after Holman Moody were based on that Ford Holman Moody front clip. That was rear steer, and that's what everybody used. Almost everybody except Bobby Allison. Bobby liked front steer car better. The front steer, which was derived from like a GM, like Camaro, Chevelle stuff. I believe it was a 66 Chevelle that Bobby had in his early days that he campaigned himself and loved it. That, I think, is where his front steer thing came from. I read his book. Should have cited that before this, but if you want to, there's a book called Miracle by Peter Golenbach, and it has a lot of interviews in there from Bobby and his brother Eddie Allison that worked with him, and there's a lot of stuff in there about the front steer, why Bobby liked front steer. So imagine it this way. This is your outside tire. This is the one that's going to be taking the most load. Whenever you're turning, this wheel's going like that, it's taking all that load. A front steer tie rod is pulling on that spindle. It's taking the load and pulling it. A rear steer is taking that load and pushing it. It's pushing to turn the wheel. Which one do you think is going to be more consistent? Which one's going to flex less? Which one is going to be stronger? This is something I remember from that book. I think it was Eddie Allison saying that Mike Laughlin would explain it like this. He said, if you're out on the beach and you got a twig and you try to draw a straight line in the sand with that twig, are you going to be able to draw a straight line pushing the twig into the sand or dragging it through the sand, pulling it? Imagine it that way. Obviously, if you're pushing the twig, it's going to try to bend. But if you're pulling it, it stays straight every time. And that's kind of the theory that the front steer works off of, and why Bobby thought it was better all those years, and why everybody else became sold on that idea in later years. I don't know, just makes more sense. Now, Holman Moody was kind of the standard for NASCAR chassis, stock car in general. I mean, even they had USAC stock cars that were Holman Moody from the 60s until I think they stopped doing cars in 70, 71, something like that. And then shortly after that, Banjo Matthews became the mainstay of the chassis guys, where teams didn't build their own chassis necessarily. They bought them from a chassis builder and finished it themselves the way they liked it. And pretty much all through the 80s, the go-to chassis was Banjo Matthews. And then around the early 90s is when people started to transition from the Banjo rear steer car to the Mike Laughlin front steer car. I think I read in some old article that 1990 was the first time Dale Earnhardt raced a front steer car. Don't know for sure, but around that time frame is when that started to happen. And then the chassis builder thing opened up a little bit once Banjo Matthews was old and his business faded off. The go-to was like Hutcherson Pagan, Mike Laughlin, and Ronnie Hopkins. And there were a few others here and there, but those were like the big three ones. And they were the go-to from the rear steer, front steer changeover in the early 90s until probably the early to mid 2000s. In the later Gen 4 era, whenever teams started to get big money from their sponsors, a lot of them brought their chassis stuff in-house. Some of them had already done that, like Penske was doing their own, Roush was doing their own, Hendrick started doing their own. Not everybody did. Roush was a weird one. They were doing their own and they were getting cars from Hopkins, so they had a little bit of both. It's kind of, some people like different things. Now I think whenever the car tomorrow came out, that's pretty much whenever the independent chassis builder as normal was gone and the teams were doing their stuff in-house. So there you go. That's the background and a little bit of the history behind front steer, rear steer. Now you know what it means. And I'm sure there's some of you out there think, well, you didn't say this, you forgot about that. Whatever, that's fine. You could break everything down into a 3-hour documentary on every nitpicking little detail if you wanted to, but this gives you the general idea of how that happened. And what made me think of this is the last video we did with the barn find stuff with the HSR guys. One of those cars was a Stal Brothers car that was rear steer, but it said Bobby Allison on it, and I thought, I don't know if that's a Bobby Allison car or a Bobby Hillen car that somebody changed the numbers on, because Bobby Allison insisted that his cars be front steer at Stal Brothers. He threatened to leave if they would not do that, so they ended up doing it. But Hillen's cars stayed rear steer, and we like Stal Brothers stuff. That's why we did this like tribute logo hat and shirt here. I always like the Stal's logo, so we made one. You can find these on StaplestonAutoWorks.com. We just got these black shirts in here like last week. Got them put on the website now. They're actually metallic and made to look like the Bobby's cars, or Hillen or Allison, whichever one. And if you order one, while supplies last, we'll throw in a hero card that actually came from the Stal Brothers race shop. They've been left in there since the team closed. Our friend Joey, who owns the building now, found these and gave us a whole box of them. If you make a shirt order from StaplestonAutoWorks.com, we'll give you one of these while supplies last. And if you ordered a hat and a shirt, we'll give you a sticker. Maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. And today's 4th of July. You want to be patriotic? We got these flag hats too, with the logo on there that matches my car, the old Good Wrench style. If you got any other kind of technical or historical backstory questions that you want to have answered that I could do a little video about, leave it in the comments. I'd be happy to do it. And I apologize for the lack of uploads on the main channel. Normally we do a history video like once a week, and I've been way slacking on that the last few months because I've been building this car. It's taken up so much of my time that I've kind of put all that on hold for a little bit to get this done. And I'm sure you can tell, I think this time in 2023, by July, I've uploaded like 7 more videos than we have right now, so we're like way behind. But that's okay, because July is going to be jam-packed with filming stuff. We're driving a lot, filming a lot. It's going to be really cool, including we're going to the IROC deal at Lime Rock Park, the IROC unit Ray Evernham's doing. He's going to have all the former drivers there, and tons of the most IROC cars that have ever been in one place since maybe ever, because he's got all the generations there. We're pretty excited about that. I'm supposed to go to Michigan and do something with Johnny Benson pretty soon. And now you know the insider information. If you don't leave right away, we'll tell you things. And you can see the build series on my Grand National Super Series car on the main channel. We just put out part 1 today. Part 1 is getting the engine put in and some stuff, doing the duct work. Part 2, making the engine run, changing some wiring around, doing some plumbing, more finished fab things. And then part 3, we take the car over to Ron Hornaday's shop, and he helps put the seat in and do a lot of like the brake fans and I don't know, freaking a lot of other stuff. Just so many little things that just ticky-tacky to death on putting one of these cars together, and you'll learn about what that process is like watching those videos. How many times have you taken your vehicle somewhere to get something fixed, and they tell you what's wrong with it, and they fix something, and it doesn't even fix the problem you had? I bet that's happened to all of you at least once. Having a diagnostic tool like Carly can help you figure out what's wrong with your car instead of taking it to somebody who's going to charge you a lot of money to do the exact same thing. 375,000 miles on this truck, and it's got one of these. Carly's app and scanner can provide manufacturer level diagnostics. Let's find out what's wrong with Elvis. It's going to be several things. Yep, it says we got a bad glow plug. See, this is cool. It gives you all this diagnosis that you don't have to search for yourself. If you don't know what a glow plug is, in my case, it tells you exactly what it's for. Typical code readers do not do this. You can also do battery health check, which in my case, my batteries are a few years old, and they're at 80% after a day of data logging, so it's pretty good. Sometimes those errors can be caused by random electrical bugs or moisture or something, so Carly, you can clear them and see if they come back. Then you know the problem is real. Whether you want to attempt to repair yourself or take it to someone else after that is different, but the diagnosis can save you a lot of money. Just click the link in the description and use my code Stapleton to get 15% off your Carly order.